I want to ask you about inflation. This was a big topic that you and I have DM'd about a little bit here and there, but there was this big, early 2025 big discussion and proposal to change Solana's inflation schedule instead of being the current curve that it's on to being more of a market-based mechanism. And in if this thing were to actually be passed, lower the inflation. You sort of took on helping advocate for this thing. It ended up failing. It didn't have the proper quorum to pass, or whatever the right phrasing is there. But it sounds like you're still kind of the mind that inflation should be cut. You're overpaying basically for Solana security. So what's your latest thinking on Sol inflation?
Yeah, I mean, and just to be clear, 62% of the stake that voted for it. 75% of the stake voted, which is 50% more turnout than any vote ever in Solana. And 62% of those who voted yes, and only 38% voted no. So we had
66%.
We had a majority, just not quite enough to make it over the 66% threshold, which is pretty hard, especially when you're trying to lower inflation, and some people's businesses make a lot of money off of inflation. But my thoughts are the same, which is that inflation should go down. Again, I think that the way that it makes sense to value things is from fundamental perspective. And I laid out this leaky bucket of inflation, which is a combination of taxes and middlemen who are making, like, the US government is making a lot of money off Solana's inflation policy right now. On the order of, 200 to 400 million a year, depending on where the price is at any given time.
In taxes.
And we don't need to pay that because we're paying ourselves, and the government is saying you're paying yourself. Like, we're creating new Solana tokens. That's the mechanism. You create some new tokens and you give them to people who already hold the tokens. And somehow the US government steps in because you're doing that and says, like, through some accounting wizardry, you have done this. Now we want our cut. And it doesn't need to be that way. And so the goal of, like, any of these things is cut costs. And when you're overpaying the US government for no reason, and the network is plenty secure, I mean, in many cases, we have more Sol, like, if you multiply the Sol stake times the price of Sol and compare it to the ETH stake times the price of ETH, in many cases we have more security on Solana in that sense. So why are we paying 6 times more than we need to, or whatever? I also think part of this discussion should be around the volatility of staking returns. So people have said, so I said, let's do something that's market based. When REV is high and everybody wants to stake, obviously we should lower the inflation rate so that we pay the US government less. And when REV is low, we should bring it back up. And that was the proposal I had. And some people were worried that this dynamic would make validator returns more uncertain. And it actually makes it less uncertain because it's a shock absorber, not like a shock amplifier. Like, if a shock happens in REV, Trump launches another coin and all of a sudden REV goes way up, everybody wants to stake, that REV brings the staking rewards up, and everybody coming into stake brings the actual returns to staking down because the inflation goes down. So it's actually a shock absorber. It is not a shock amplifier. Mm-hmm. That was just a fundamental, like, mathematical misunderstanding from the critics. And
interesting.
I think it's, like, ultimately on us to, like, have explained that better. But next time we go in, I think we will have a much clearer explanation of all these things. And sometimes it's like, you know all these things, and then you don't realize that the person you're talking to is actually, like, a performance dev, and they know, like, a shit ton about networking, and they don't know about real versus nominal returns or whatever. And you just have to put things out in a much clearer way than we did. And I think if we do that, it will do better. I also think we'll do it a little bit more gradually. It'll probably be a 2-year rollout. It will be a gentler thing that we'll propose. And yeah, right now there's some governance infrastructure that's getting built. That's why we're kind of waiting, because last time we had this version of the vote where some people were a little unhappy that they had stake on a validator that they didn't get to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just kind of hoping that that infrastructure, which is getting built out by some teams, will be there so that anybody who has stake can, like, you're staking with a validator, but you're not beholden to what that validator votes on that thing. You can vote your own stake as well.
Can you explain maybe the difference between like the real yield and the nominal yield? So as Blockworks would define it, I guess you have a nominal yield of 7 or 8% APY on staking. So like I will get a 7 or 8% return on my SOL if I stake today with a lot of validators. But not all of that is real yield because it doesn't actually come from like tips that are being paid to the validator that are then passed along to me. It comes from like inflation, which dilutes me. So can you just explain why it's not, people maybe misunderstand what the nominal yield is versus the actual yield that you're getting for staking SOL?
Right. So suppose all of the SOL was staked and we made 5% new SOL every year and we distribute it to all the stakers. Now you have more SOL in your balance, but the fraction of the SOL supply that you have is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same way that if the US government prints a bunch of new money and rebases the dollar, like the US government could say everybody who holds a US dollar is going to get $2 in their account tomorrow. And nothing would happen other than that everybody would have to reprint their menus. And they would reprint their menu, they would double the prices, everybody's salary would get doubled, and we would go from there. And that's kind of like what happened when they printed a ton of money during COVID. And so that's the idea of real versus nominal yield. It's like real is after you account for the fact that there's been new issuance. That is, every time if you hold Solana in your account and Solana is inflating at 5% a year, then your fraction of the network is going down by 5% a year. And so you need to account for that in your ultimate, like, I'm holding this thing. What is my return on investment for holding this thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said. And we can expect some kind of new, I know there's a proposal up right now from, I think, Galaxy Research that basically said, let's just let validators vote on how much to, lower the inflation rate. Do you have thoughts on that versus going with the market-based mechanism?
Well, I don't necessarily mind the idea. So it is a little bit of a technical challenge to do this thing where we have stakers kind of the ability to override the validator vote. So you stake with a validator, they vote. If you like it, you can let it sit. If you don't like it, you can vote a different way if you want to. There's a lot of stake accounts. Like I think there's over 1 million stake accounts. And so just the technology of like doing this is a little hard. And once you add in this, like you can specify some continuous value, it's even harder. So I don't mind the idea. I think it's like kind of nice it was a little bit contentious last time and I'm not sure it needed to be, but that's just how these things go. And because it was a binary outcome, it was super contentious.
Yeah.
And I think it might be a nice technology to like, we're all on the same page. Solana wins. It's just like we have some disagreements about the math or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was a continuum, maybe it would have been less contentious, which would be nice. It just, I think part of what we want to see is stakers being able to directly express their votes. And so we're hoping that comes soon. And then we'll likely bring a new proposal.
Great.